workshop for Wednesday, May 27th at 2 p.m. It is 2:21. I call this meeting to order. Do we have any amendments to the agenda?
None here, Mr. Chair.
I have none.
Have a motion, please?
I move that we approve the agenda as written.
Second.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Next is 3 projects. Discussion of potential revenue sources. Ms. Schmelzer?
Yes, so we've talked about this in the past, that there's been some, there was research by a revenue task force. There was an economic development committee years ago that would look at potential revenue sources. There's also a group that worked on something called the Big Fix, and so I thought we would just bring it back to the board, and some of you have also asked to have discussions about some of these items, basically ways that we can find revenue for the county. I know we've talked a little bit in the past about should there be a consumption tax, should there be a gas tax, should we increase the transient lodging tax? I know there's been discussions about assessments. Is there something we can do on that end? So what I did was I just pulled a little information for you together to help us or begin those conversations, but I'll start with the transient lodging tax because I think that's probably the most recent one that we've looked at when it was adopted last year. There has been some concern or some comments, I think, about 2 things regarding the transient lodging tax. And one is there a disparity there with the unincorporated areas and harbor hotels basically paying into a transient lodging tax where a good portion is benefiting the event center? And should we be looking at perhaps giving the event center a different percentage than what we do right now? One thought is, do we pay what the city is paying? So I think we need to look at some of that stuff. Some of the other conversations about the transient lodging tax was, should it be increased and should there be an additional percentage put on top of the cities? For example, should the transient lodging tax in Craig County be 9% across the board? And if a city is at 7%, that additional 2% goes to the county. Do we raise the county up to 9%? Or what are those numbers? Is that something we even look at? So I think we need to look at, have some discussion on that. As far as consumption taxes, I did pull off the most recent data that we have from Travel Oregon. Dean Runyon does a lot of economic development data for Travel Oregon. And, in the past, last year, around election time, we talked about a consumption tax and should that be on visitors? I think people that did not live here. We do have up-to-date numbers on what the visitors spend at food stores, if we wanted to look at potentially a tax on that. We also have the data on what the visitors are spending on food service, and we also have information on what the visitors are spending on gas. Or is it something where we want to do this as a countywide tax to everyone, or do we want to just stick to it with visitors? So I do have those numbers for you if you want to have discussions on that. There was some discussion about gas tax. I don't have the gas tax volumes with me, but I believe Commissioner Pash, you might have had some of that. And then there was questions on something to consider was, what can we do to help with assessments, or some questions to get more assessments going here. And then the other thing that I just have here as a possible idea, and it's not really to bring tax revenue in, it's more to get things done. I know in the past we've talked about ways to help the port, and one idea when you, kind of on the same line when you're talking about transient lodging taxes, there's something that's called a hospitality zone, where perhaps the whole port area and harbor becomes a hospitality zone, and there's a fee, not a tax, assessed on businesses there, and then those fees go to help improve that area. Kind of like an urban renewal, but that uses a tax, of course. And then other ideas. There's been ideas about perhaps raising the fees on fishing licenses, some of those things. So I guess it's your meeting. I just want to let you know I do have some information here to help guide us through these conversations, and just kind of see what direction you want to go.
Mr. Gold?
I've actually given this quite a bit of thought, and I think we're missing a lot of the low-hanging fruit here with regards to building permits, assessments, and so forth, and I just kind of have some questions here. Can we compare assessments to permits so that the properties that have conditional permits that have not been updated could be reassessed? And the reason this question came to mind is because recently someone reported to me that they knew of a homeowner who had very low property taxes in the same area they were in, and the reason they were having these low property taxes is because they were considered unoccupied. So basically what's happening here, things aren't being updated. Could we make sure that all county properties with existing structures have permits? And somehow we need to be able to coordinate between the various departments, our building department, our planning department, the assessor's office. And that's one of the reasons I was very pro getting that program that, it included a whole lot more than dog licenses. That's why I was interested in supporting that. Is it possible for assessments to be caught up with the new software? I think we have to have some sort of accountability there. Can we make sure that, hey, we're getting our bang for our buck? What would it take to do this? Do we need maybe some more help? I don't know, but this is low-hanging fruit that we're missing. Are all county properties assessed equitably? The reason this came to mind is because it's been reported to me that we have all of the borax property. All of that property, even though it's within the city boundaries and ready to be developed, was paying less property tax than an individual who lived adjacent to that property with a lot less acreage, like 5-8 acres. So I thought, well, that needs to be investigated. Another question that came to mind is, how soon is it possible to get planning/permits, assessments, and code enforcement information into digital form so that these departments can work together? As I see it, they need to be working together so that things need to be coordinated so that all the properties in the county are in compliance and also being assessed fairly. 6, are we assessing properties for their best possible use? And this brings me back to the borax property. That's kind of been set up so that they could put 1,000 homes there, essentially. Is it being taxed for its best possible use? I don't know the answer to the question whether we can tax for the best possible use or whether it's forestry grazing or whatever, but obviously that's going to be developed here soon. Would it help to update our comprehensive plan and zoning map and then zoning codes? We've talked about this a little bit, where we realize that there's not enough housing here in Curry County, therefore some of the zoning is going to have to change, but that takes a long time with public hearings, etc. And finally, I would just like to say that I doubt that individuals in the county are going to be willing to increase their property tax rates if they see that the county, until they see that the county is up to speed with assessments and permitting. As for TLT taxes, I just booked a motel room, and that was up in the Salem area. They are charging 12% TLT tax. And I haven't been to any other motel that's charged less than 10. So as far as TLT, I think we'd be missing the boat if we don't go for at least 10%. I think that's doable. And I think most people would be apt to vote for that. Those are my comments.
Commissioner Boyce, you have any comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I promoted a serious research of the consumption tax based on the $1 million that could come over from Delaware County, primarily shopping in South County, Brookings area, Harbor. And it's the fairest tax you can possibly have for the low-income folks that have few funds. The non-labeled foods would be exempt. So if they were buying healthy foods, they wouldn't have to pay any tax on them. That was all pretty broad, and but I don't think I would support anything right now. And probably for a reasonable extended time, because we don't know what's going to happen to even discuss, in my opinion, a raise in the lodging tax fee when so many of our lodging facilities throughout the county are in a tremendous bind. Some of them we know won't make it, which goes back to the CARES Refund Act from the federal government, how we can help those businesses as our number one priority. Before you come on board, I pushed back as hard as I could on additional fees for planning a building. Thought the timing was not good. I said very clearly during that time, we don't know where this great economy is going. Can we hold off a little while? Now, I will openly admit that it didn't seem to hurt at the time, but now it is hurting because people are pulling back on their investments. People are pulling back on their remodels. They're less apt to want to pay higher fees. So the TLT, the consumption tax, our state government is talking about 10% reduction. I'm very happy that you are looking at additional resources. I'm not in any way negative or complaining about that. I think that's wise. I'm just looking at where we are as a rural county in this corner of Oregon right now with what our people are dealing with. I see no reason to really hope that we can, at least for 6 months, and I think probably 18 months, that we can really look to having any higher fees. And if we talk about a transient lodging of 12%, I think that would be just to push some of our people over the edge that are trying to employ people and have lodging facilities keep well established. So every day's a new adventure. We just got to watch close and be extremely careful what message we send to our citizens, and be well advised to watch and see who needs help, and if there's a way, hopefully we can assist. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Gold?
My understanding of the TLT tax is the motel owners do not pay it. It's the people booking the rooms that pay it. And I know when I book a room, I just expect to pay it. You're not going to look on Expedia.com or wherever you look for your rooms and expect not to pay a tax. At least that's been my experience.
Commissioner Boyce?
Well, the only thing I'd add to that is that we're in fierce competition with Newport, Eureka, Bend, and so people are going to go where they are not hit too hard. I agree. We all pay that tax, but at the end of the bill, we're looking and going, $25? I just paid extra for this room? So it does have an impact, in my opinion. So timing is everything. Thank you again.
I can show you bills from pretty much hotels in Bend and Eugene and California that in recent weeks and months. Eugene not only has a lodging tax, they also have a city tax on their hotel bills. Bend has a city and county tax on their bills. So, I think everyone is doing it now. It's just a matter of how deep you want to go. This workshop I actually spoke with Ms. Schmelzer about, and we really, I was excited to get people to start to talk. We're not trying to come up with something today on this. It's just to start a conversation about how we're going to fill the shortfalls of the county. Would I like to see a ballot measure in the fall on something? Yes, I would, but I want to be clear that my intention for this raising of money on this particular issue is for our sheriff's department. We need to find a way to permanently fund the essential services of the Sheriff's Department. And I don't know if that is coming up with, some kind of a levy or some kind of, I don't know the words on all the government ways on how they do that, but we need to come up with a way to fund the Sheriff's Department that he knows every year where he's going to be, kind of like these special districts that they get, at 3% a year raise, and they know right where their budget's going to be every year, and they can plan. We need to find ways to make sure that our sheriff is funded. As you probably read, they through the smart thinking of a Curry County deputy the other day, they caught a wanted felon here in Curry County through a sharp eye and a smart deputy and well trained.
Good stuff.
Crime is going to increase in this county, and he has to have the wherewithal and the equipment to run that department and be able to protect the citizens of this county. And I think that is probably, in my opinion, probably the biggest job that we have is to protect the citizens of this county. To raise taxes, it's a sore subject here, but we've got to find a way to pay for the essentials of this county. I would hope that people are seeing that this board, Ms. Schmelzer, and the people in our offices now are working hard looking for grants, as you heard Mr. Christensen this morning. All the grants that he's worked at to get. The county is functioning, I believe, much harder than it has in past years of recent, and we've got to find some ways to pay the bills of this county, especially the essential bills. We've heard the governor say, well, you've got that road fund, and if you won't spend it, I will. So, that road fund is for emergencies like the towers. When that came up, when we get a county road that goes out, we need that money there to protect the citizens of this county. So to keep tapping that road fund and trying to say that we're going to loan or borrow the money and loan it back, that's not a viable future for this county. I would just like everyone to start to think, and I would hope that if we have another workshop in the future on this, that we could get some business minds. I think everyone on this board would be open to hearing from the business minds of this county. Let's sit down and have a workshop and start to talk about, some of the things that we can do. I did look into looking into a gas tax for the entire county that everyone paid fairly into. It wouldn't be just the citizens that live here. It would be anyone that visits the city. We would all pay fairly into that tax, and these are things we can look at. We can also look at a property tax. I think a property tax would have a hard time going through. I don't know that it would go through. Commissioner Boyce came up with a prepared food tax a couple of years ago. I know you were talking about that. Again, that would probably hit the tourists a lot harder than it would hit the locals. We've got a lot of seniors in this county that live on very tight budgets, that live paycheck to paycheck and or Social Security to Social Security. So we've got to be very careful with that. But we've also got to find that blend, that mix where no one pays too much, but we still get the bills paid for the county. So I don't know, can we organize better, maybe a meeting, a workshop that we could invite, people to come in and just business minds of this county that have just a lifetime of business and sit down and begin to talk about something that we could put on a ballot in a measure that would pass, that would work.
Yeah,
It's reasonable.
I think we have to have a little direction on, what type of idea we'd want them to talk about, rather than just an open slate. For example, because I think your group that's going to discuss perhaps increasing a transient lodging tax is probably going to be different than your group that's going to discuss maybe a food tax. But just as we were talking, I just have some data too for you, some updated, we were talking about Bend versus some of these other areas, so I do have those numbers in front of me if you want them, but since Assessor Colin is here, maybe we could talk about, I told him that there was probably going to be some questions about assessments. Maybe we could talk about some of those assessment questions first, and then move on to maybe discussing each tax one by one to see which direction we want to go. You want to do that?
Sure.
Yeah, good afternoon, Commissioners. Sue, I didn't get here soon enough to hear your list of questions. The ones that I did hear, really, it kind of surprises me. I mean, do you realize you're the liaison commissioner to the assessor's office?
Yes, that's right.
It'd be easy enough for you to give me those questions anytime and allow me the time to get the answers to you.
Okay, I'll give them to you. Okay.
I'm surprised you didn't realize we had that relationship. I mean, you've been a commissioner for 3.5 years, and you asked
Can I just
questions
ask
from
you,
time to time.
Can I just ask you one question?
Go ahead.
When we assess properties, are they assessed for their best possible use? For instance, the Borax property.
It's called highest and best use.
Right, okay, I don't know all the terminology, but that's just a yes or no. Can we do that? Okay,
Yes, subject to any other exemptions and partial exemptions that are allowed by Oregon law.
okay, and some of my questions came out of inquiries that were given to me just within the last couple of days, and some comments. And it bothered me, that's why I asked some of these questions. That's why I didn't get to you right away. So, looking at inequities, that bothers me. And I guess most of these inequities are coming, well, one of the reasons is because we are so far behind. I realize you said we were like 18 years behind at one point.
We're on an 18-year cycle, right?
Okay,
on
so
reassessment.
question, the new software that you're getting, is that going to help us improve that?
It will help, and you, as part of the Budget Committee, also allowed us additional resources. So we put another appraiser on. And given some time, we will reduce that 18-year cycle probably to something closer to a 6 to 8 year cycle.
So, do you have any timeline for doing that? Just curious.
Probably take 6 to 8 years to get there, sure.
6 to 8 years to
Right.
get there? Okay. So what is your goal for this year?
Our goal for this year is to probably do physical reappraisals on 4,000 to 5,000 properties.
Okay, so,
That's not including the properties that we go and visit for building permits.
so that 18-year cycle, we're going to get it down to what this year? I'm just,
I haven't mapped that out.
okay, just asking, so.
Can I ask a quick question? I know when we did last year at the Budget Committee, we did give you 2 more positions that you requested. Have those both been filled yet? I think you said one was, have they both been filled? I know you said you also lost someone as well.
Well, last year, at last year's budget cycle, not this most recent budget session we went through, what I was given was 2.5 new FTEs, but 1.5 FTEs was subject to legislation going through that put the Curry pilot project in place, which essentially would have had the state and the other districts share in 1.5 FTEs of resource for assessment. The legislature didn't pass that, so that's not money that we've looked to spend, because my request was contingent on getting that money. We have the other FTE that you gave us, and like you said, we've had a couple of people that poached in the last year, And so I'm still down one person
Okay.
that we're doing interviews for.
What I'm asking is if you get that second person, which my personal opinion, now's the greatest time to hire people because there's a lot of people I believe looking for work right now that you might find a little bit better cream of the crop.
There are a few more people showing up in the,
Yeah. So what I'm wondering is if you were to get that other person, you're saying it would still be 4 to 5 years, you think, to get down to a 6 to 8 year role?
we got 23,000 properties in the county. It takes a while to get through them.
No, so I'm just asking.
And so if we can cover 4,000 to 5,000 properties a year, well, 4,000 a year would get us down to 6 years, so.
Okay. Commissioner Boyce, you had your hand up?
Thank you. As far as borax goes, unfortunately, they have folded their tent, at least hopefully it's just temporary, but it doesn't look too good, which is a sign of the economy where we're at. What I just communicated, that concern I have, I think mostly we all share that what's going to happen to our citizens, our businesses, our employers, our whole program, the capacity for people to pay their bills. So I don't want to overstate it, but I'm just glad right now we're in a little bit of a holding pattern, or at least should be, and trying to determine where the future is going to be with support for our essential services, as you pointed out, Commissioner Pash. Yes, but we have to be able to make the case that if whether it's, I'll use San Francisco, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Nobody's going there now because it's a mess, and their rates and their fees and all that are so high. I just want to be on guard for that a little bit. I don't mind competing with Bend and Florence, all the above. I think we'll come out fine, and it's good, healthy competition. But we're going to need time to assess what has happened the last 3 months, and I think we're all on the same page with that and doing our best. Again, that's not to throw cold water on this effort. I think it's wise, but. On the consumption tax, it wasn't a meals tax. It was tourism A and tourism B. Basically, 1.5% would raise about $2 million. Almost half of that would be from Delaware County. They're paying a 10% sales tax. That's why they come to Brookings, as I think you know, where they could pay 2% and still would save 7% from what they're paying for fuel and Walmart and all that. So I still think that is an option worth serious consideration to send before the people. I'm hopeful that our assessor's office and other county services will be able to jump right in and fill some of those spots. But we know, like the sheriff's department, all the above, it's not easy. But people do want to live in Curry County. We just want to keep that direction flowing. Thank you.
Did you have anything further, sir?
Well, yeah, going back to your example of the borax property, I think this is one of those properties where, obviously, the people you're talking to have a real misconception of the property tax system. In Oregon, there's 2 resource use special assessments that are available to property owners. One is for farmland and the other is for forest land. The borax property is specially assessed as forest land.
So are they forestry grazing?
At this time, the special assessment really has nothing to do with what the zoning is on the property. So they qualify for a much lower per acre assessed value than a person that does not qualify for a special assessment. The legislature put those special assessments back in I think the 70s. It was before my time. I couldn't give you the exact reason they did them, but I think at the time, farm and forest land owners were getting taxed out of their properties because the use that they were putting them to wasn't even paying the taxes.
So if they took all the trees off, which I've heard a lot of the trees have been taken off, does that change the tax rate or no? Just curious.
If they log and don't replant, then the property would be disqualified from
Okay.
forest land. So, I mean, if that's occurring on the property and you're aware of it, let us know.
I'm letting you know right now. Because that's what I heard from several sources, not just one, so.
You might need lots, is what you're saying, the lots that they're on, because I'm sure what you're saying is if they're a 100 acre, if they're a 100 acre lot.
I know where the properties are.
If they're a 100 acre lot and they've only cleared 2 acres of timber off of them, then it's probably still going to fall into the same. Where if it's a 20 acre lot and they've cleared 18 acres of timber off of them.
But be really surprised that they're not reforesting there, because if they weren't, the state forester would notify
Yeah,
us.
and I'm not sure on that, to be honest with you.
Well, yeah, so I
But
mean,
that ought to be
really
checked
what
out.
you're doing is passing along rumors.
Commissioner Boyce?
Excuse me, you were first, but they have 3 years for the reproduction. Legally 3 years. Anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Ms. Melzer?
I just had a question, Jim. With ag, don't they have to report to you that they're taking so much off of it or they're farming it? And isn't it the same thing with forestry? I just remember, I hate to use Josephine as an example, but I remember that for people, when we would work with people, they would have to prove to us that they were actually a farm or a forest use to get certain breaks. But I don't know enough about assessments to know whether that's across the board or maybe that's just on the zones. So I'm just curious, do they have to, like a farmer, do they have to report to you that they're farming it?
That's correct.
Okay. They have to fill out certain...
So the qualifications for farm use properties are that it must be used for a farm use,
Okay.
and it must produce a certain minimum gross income in 3 out of 5 years.
So probably the same thing with this property. Oh.
That's done through the state, and then I think the state alerts.
Actually, you report to the assessor's office.
So do they have to do that, say, on a yearly basis or on a regular basis, report back to you as to what's happening with the land?
They have to report on farmland. They have to report to us when we send them a questionnaire, when we ask them for the information.
Okay, so how often do you ask for that information?
Well, once every 5 years.
Okay, just
I do
curious.
one from the state every year, though. I do an ag for.
Well, you're filling out your Schedule F for farm use with your income tax returns.
Right. Commissioner Boyce?
We have a shortage of housing, and part of the reason, I'm told, so I don't want to be guilty of spreading rumors, but part of the reason that Borax has lost interest, at least and hopefully it's temporary, is because there's an anti-development attitude here. The absolute dynamic of what that could have produced for South Curry County. All I hope is that cooler heads prevail and we bring them back, or do our part to hopefully bring them back. But there is a small percentage of people in Brookings that don't want it, and so they do start rumors, and it's really unfortunate because it, from what I understand, is a very reputable company. And they have invested a ton of money and effort and planning and guidelines followed. And if we want to change land use planning, we have to go to Salem. That's not a county issue. That is a Land Conservation and Development Commission situation, and we have failed over the years. 45 years on that. Thank you.
So when the Borax property gets platted for home sites, the property will be removed from special assessment, pay 5 years back taxes on that property based on the difference between what it was assessed at and what it would have paid had it not been in special assessment. And then, of course, once they start building the houses out there, we'll be picking up those properties. I think, my understanding of the Borax project was they had planned to put 2,000 homes out there. That's going to put some value on the rolls, if it ever happens. They've been talking about doing the Borax project ever since I've been county assessor, and that's been a few years. But if they had 2,000 homes out there at a median value home, say 500,000, really, what that works out to, by the time all those assessments are on the roll at the county's tax rate, is an additional maybe $450,000 in taxes a year for Curry County.
For Curry.
It's not as much as you think it is. And I'm just talking about Curry County government. I'm not talking about the other taxing districts. So I think I calculated years ago, in order to replace the forced receipts that we were losing at the time, it would take another 11,000 homes in Curry County to replace the $3.5 million in taxes that we were getting at that time. Development is good. It does, when you get the values on it, it does raise more in property tax. But $450,000, I mean, would that even cover the extra police protection you'd need for 2,000 new homes in the county?
Commissioner Gold, you had mentioned updating the comprehensive plan and zoning, and you had just briefly mentioned that too. So I have spoken with the planning department on that, and we talked about this again last August, I think, when we did the housing declaration. The comp plan is grossly out of date, and so is the zoning code, so they do need to be updated. One of the big challenges we have right now with putting housing in the unincorporated areas is the plan shows a lot of, and I'll use Harbor as an example, it shows a lot of that land as agricultural, so it's zoned agricultural. That made sense when that plan was created, but since then we've lost a lot of farms there, or they've been fragmented. So it really is time to revisit that and see if some of that land should be rezoned to maybe residential or something, because then it would open it up for development. So it definitely does play a role in getting more homes on the tax rolls.
I have another question. Once we get everything in the computer digitally with your tax program and so forth.
All assessments are in the computer.
Okay, they are, but with the new.
And they're all available to you through GIS.
Right. But is it
And
possible?
they are available to the planning department and those other departments that you mentioned through GIS.
Okay, so would it help to have some sort of alert system going on when, like the permits, they sometimes give what is it called, provisional or use permits that aren't for plans, for permits and so forth, conditional use permits, and they're up after a certain time. So is there some kind of a way that we could get an alert system going that, hey, it's time for these people come in and renew their permits or get their assessments updated, that sort of thing, so that it can be coordinated between the departments?
I don't know what you envision as your alert system, but the system already does provide that we get copies of their building permits when they issue them.
Okay.
So the assessor's office knows when they issue a building permit.
So do you go out right away and assess that property or reassess?
The
Or?
assessment date is January 1st of the year, so we do most of our new construction reappraisals from November through March.
Okay. I just think we have this low-hanging fruit sitting there that we could be getting some.
I don't think
revenue
there's
out
the
of.
low-hanging fruit that you think that there is.
I realize that the county only gets approximately 6%, but what about all the other special districts that rely on?
Well, even without regard to the other special districts, when somebody takes out a building permit, the assessor gets a copy of it, and we go and we do an appraisal on it.
Yeah, and then we've got the problem of homes that don't have permits. I know that's not your problem.
No, it is our problem. I mean, we just have to discover those through physical reappraisal, going door to door. And we've been picking those properties up since the beginning of the time. I've just been reporting them to the Board of Commissioners.
Yes, you have.
For the last 6 or 7 years.
Right, and I've seen a lot of those same pictures.
Has code enforcement worked with you and the amnesty program? I mean, was there much gain from them, that at all, or no? I see the smile coming.
I don't think so. I think they found some properties that we already had on the rolls.
Okay.
if the amnesty program produced anything that we weren't aware of, I'm going to say it's probably less than a handful of properties. Now, that doesn't make it a bad thing. I mean, the amnesty program, the people came in and talked about the fact that they built something without a building permit. So if they got their building permits and we sent inspectors out there to look at their properties and they got the appropriate building inspections, and if they passed those, now we've got appropriately built properties that are safe. And to me, that was the big thing about the amnesty program, was to be sure that the structures we're building in Curry County are safe for human habitation, right?
That and resale, yeah. Make sure whoever's going to buy them properties is protected by the code.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I'd like to do is, if we could, is start to make a plan. I mean, I believe that we will have one bite of an apple this fall.
Excuse me, is that all you need for
That's
me?
it. Thank you.
As you know, I will respond to any questions you send me,
Sure.
so.
Hold sheet, how's that? It's all written out for you. Thanks.
So if we could start to look to plan in maybe 30 days or so to get a group together to start to look at ways to get something possibly on a ballot measure so that people in the county can look at exactly where we are and you know, the needs, if there is that dire of a need right now. I mean, I personally, again, I like to be proactive, and I can see our sheriff's department is going to have to grow quickly, and they are going to have more resources. I'm not trying to instill fear into anyone, but anyone that can't see that things are going to come to Curry County, I'm pretty sure they are. Commissioner Gold?
Just one last comment on the consumption tax. I was told that, you know, if we have tourists paying the consumption tax, we could probably deal with it. And I said to Julie this morning, well, how could you determine that it's a tourist buying the groceries or whatever? And she says over in Hawaii, they have a special card that's used by the locals. And then others have to pay the consumption tax if they don't have that card. So that's something to consider too.
Okay, so based on that comment, Commissioner Patch, are you looking for one group to look at transient lodging tax issues and another one to look more on the consumption tax side of it, and have like two?
Why do you think there would be such a big conflict? I just think it's an overall conversation about, you know, what to look at. And I know you may have someone that owns a hotel that's going to only want to talk about consumption taxes, and someone that owns a store only going to want to talk about. But I think the people in the group would be smart enough to decipher that.
Okay.
I would just like to see a large enough group of diversity that one vote won't matter. You know, one vote won't sway anything. It'll be a large enough group that we can all sit and talk and come up with a concise
So are we looking at kind of reinstating, you know, we had a citizen revenue task force, and then we found out that it had and we had actually made an appointment to it, and then we found out that that task force actually, when it was set up, had a termination date in it. Are we looking at reinstating something like that and getting the group together to start talking?
I think that would be a good idea, simply because you could get people from the community, business people or other people who are interested to get together and come up with ideas. I don't think all the ideas are going to come from 3 people or 4 people.
And I also think it would be good if, let's say we're looking at, you know, the fairgrounds to be here, and, or you know, they're going to get some, if you're looking at raising TLT, have a representative of the fairgrounds here, have a representative of Harbor here to discuss, you know, okay, your hotel is going to pay into this, so let's have Harbor here as well, Port of Harbor, to discuss why they need part of that money. And let everyone make their case. Let the sheriff come over here and discuss, this is what I see coming down the road and what we're going to need, and I might not need it at this moment, but a year or 2 years from now, I see this happening. and have those people as part of the conversation as well, so that, you know, Commissioner Boyce or I might not be able to tell someone, you know, how or why they need this, but the sheriff will make it clear why he needs it. It's like the canine program. I heard for a long time nobody wanted the canines here. Look what they've done. I mean, this canine unit has been unbelievable.
So is it the board's preference to have this group come up with some recommendations in time for the November ballot?
Yes.
Okay.
And if we don't make it, we don't make it. But that would be my preference, yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That would give us 3 months. Needs to be ready by August, I presume, right?
Yes, so I'm sorry.
That's okay. I have tons of information on the consumption tax based on basically, now I can't remember if it was 1.5% or 2%.
I thought it was 1.5, if I recall.
Yes, I think you might be right there, but it got a lot of work within the Oregon State Legislature as a pilot program back with Commissioners Waddle and Rhodes. I want to say 2014. And the 1.5% would raise about $2 million, as I mentioned earlier. But anyway, I have tons of information on that, but I did have a question for you. Just quick clarification. You mentioned the port. Do you mean Port of Brookings Harbor and not all the ports or jointly or?
You mean talking on the hospitality zone?
I think that's what you said. But that's very interesting, by the way.
Yeah, so I was just using Port of Brookings Harbors as an example. So,
Okay, great.
It was an idea that was introduced along the I-5 corridor. I don't think there's any in Oregon right now, unless maybe there's been some established in the last year. But basically, it is businesses in a zone, what you identify on a map. They pay in, and then they also control. You have this board who controls what you do with the money. You know, maybe it's you're buying light poles or benches or doing streetscaping or something to make an area attractive so more visitors go there and spend money.
Kind of like Main Street.
Kind of like Main Street, but in the unincorporated areas, you don't have a Main Street. Or
Good.
it could be on top of a Main Street.
Okay.
Commissioner Gold?
I was just going to ask, were those businesses able to vote on this, whether they wanted to manage that, number one, number two, whether they would want to be taxed?
It's a
Or
fee,
a fee.
not tax.
Yeah, okay.
The example that I saw, it was set by the board, and they did not have a say on it. So, but I think that's something we'd have to look at, because people may not even be interested in that.
Well, and with businesses hurting, I would hesitate to put any extra fees on them at this point. in
That's
time.
not what you said at first.
Although that's,
Did I misunderstand?
I
Yes,
think
you
you
did.
did.
Okay.
The fee of a TLT, the business doesn't pay it, just like this. It would not be a fee that the business pays, the customer pays it, and then it goes to the person or to the area that the fee's been designated to. I want to read a couple of things. These are Oregon travel impacts that Mr. Melzer gave me this morning. Curry County, and these are commodities. These are strictly commodities categories. Food stores in 2019, visitors only. These are visitor only. Spent $18.7 million. Food service industry in Curry County, visitors only, $42 million. Transportation and gasoline, visitors spent $13,064,000. And in
That's just it on
the other one is, I think it's a total of everything. Food service accommodations, food stores, arts and entertainment, retail sales, transportation, gas, everything was $189 million. And that was actually up.
That's for Curry County.
I'm sorry, $139 million. And every year they've been going up 2 to 3%. In 1 year it went up 4%. So we are going up every year on an average of 2 to 4% on an annual basis for tourist revenue being brought into Curry County.
So can you, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can you, I don't have that information, but I'm sure Director Schmiller will provide it. Can you say where the 139, what 139 million, what that number again represented?
It represented the food service, which I just gave you some of the breakdowns of that, what the food service was, which was basically of the 139 million, make it 140 million.
Just food service.
Food service was 30.4%. Accommodations was 21.8%. Food stores was 13.4%. Arts, entertainment, and recreation is 12.6%. Retail sales was 12.5%. And transportation and gas was 9.4%.
That's all of the 139 million?
Yes.
Thank you. That helped me a lot. So I want to read something real quick here, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
This really kind of interests me. The use of the quote zone of hospitality rule unquote in the workplace, the 10-5 rule, whatever that represents, also known as the zone of hospitality rule, is a well-known guiding principle for extending courtesy to customers in service industries. The rule instructs whenever a staff member is within 10 feet of a customer, the staff member must make eye contact. Oh, never mind. I'm reading the wrong thing, but
That's good. Those are like best practices.
Yes, great. So I apologize, Mr. Chair. I was reading the wrong one. I won't go back, but the hospitality zone, if it was used within our ports in some growing, promoting fashion, that sounds like a kind of a neat thing to me, at least initially.
There's also one thing that this county doesn't do, but we could do. Cities have urban renewal. Counties can do urban renewal districts. I guess the reason why I hesitate to bring that to you is it's a lot of money to set up, and it takes a lot of oversight. So may not be the best option for our county.
Well, before we stop on this, we have a public comment from Mr. Barnes.
Thank you all, David Barnes. I've been listening to this. I remember this conversation going back years now. A gas tax would have to be countywide. We don't have any gas stations in the county itself. There's only 2 gas stations, I think, that are in an incorporated county. The consumption tax that you're talking about, good luck making it tourists only, because if you recall, it was just about a year ago now that this panel put up a non-binding emergency question on the ballot last May, and it was, I think, 83.65% of the people in this county said no to a consumption tax. The TLT, right now something you could do on a TLT is add $1 a dog. You know, you're charging people already. Most people who come to this county bring dogs with them. Throw $1 a dog on there for people who come into this county. You know, what Dave Fortman said about the amount of dogs we have here, I see people in all these parks, they all have dogs with them. So that's extra money right there. You also, the TLT, sales tax, gas tax. With the gas tax, there's something I think that you need to understand. Curry County is still paying some of the highest gas per gallon in the country. My parents live in South Florida. They're paying $1.12 a gallon down there. You know, we're paying $2.50 here still. You know, I have to remind you, the people in this county, 17.7% of the people who live in Curry live 200% below the poverty level. You know, 70% of them are over the age of 65 years. You know, 26% of the people who live in this county are disabled. There's only barely 25% of the people in this county that have jobs. Our average family income in this county is $61,000. That's 25% below the state average. You know, we have 70% of the people, of those people who are working, over 70% of them make less than $40,000 a year. You know, if you're going to raise fees, I understand the need to fund government, but I've watched over the last year or two, a year and a half now, as everybody gets an assistant, everybody gets a car, everybody gets all these things. You know, as a citizen, I'm forced to cut back when I don't have the money that I want to. I would love to live a grand life and be able to do all kinds of things, but I don't have that kind of money, so I got to cut back and I got to cut things out. And, you know, before I've watched this, just since the beginning of this year, this commission has spent over probably close to $750,000 you've committed since just the beginning of this year on softwares, new hires, $100,000 last week on software and a feasibility study. You committed to $300,000 for a financial software program. You've spent $30,000 on a strategic plan. The money just keeps going out and out and out every week. And before you start asking the people of this county for more, I'd like to ask you to look inside yourselves and start cutting back some of your own expenses. It's tough all around, and you as government are no different than every household in this county. There's just not enough money to go around anymore. The dog license fee you're going to put on that, you're going to start enforcing dog licensing at $25 a dog. Somebody who doesn't have money, $25 a dog. If you have 2 dogs in your house, that's $50. That for me or you, that's lunch out up on the docks in Bandon. For other people, for a lot of people in this county, that's a week's worth of groceries. And, it's not money that this commission is going to get. There's laws about where dog licensing money gets spent, just like there's laws about where the TLT gets spent. So you don't get the money that you're going to collect from dog licensing. That goes into animal-funded things, just like TLT goes into tourism. So, I just urge you, before you start trying to take more money out of the people's pockets, start thinking about a little bit of your own, Maybe you guys take a pay cut, across the board, something like that. Show that you got some skin in this game too. So that'd go a long way to selling anything you want to add on to the people, if you get some skin in there too. So, thank you.
Commissioner Boyce?
Yeah, I think the reason the TLT passed with the citizens because they trusted that, and we did a fairly good analysis on setting up the percentages. 25% going to law enforcement. Was it 70% goes to tourism promotion? So we just have to be careful, and I'm not saying the board is promoting, going after the tourist dollar, but in a fair, equitable way, it might be acceptable. I just want to be careful what kind of message we send, again, when we're trying to compete with other areas. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Oh, other than we need to live, I voted against some of this spending. Been hard decisions, but, we got to live within our means, and points well taken. Thank you again.
Well, again, I'll defend some of the spending. Mr. Barnes mentioned a lot of that, or not a lot of it. Some of it is covered by grants. Some of it is still pending, that is being looked at for grants. And I believe if you've got a program that saves the county, 1,000 hours a year in labor, that money can be deferred to the use or the purchase and or licensing of that software. So there's different ways to peel an apple. What I'd like to know is, can we set something up, if it would be all right with the entire board, a workshop again in about a month?
Sure. What I was going to do is bring an ordinance forward at next week's meeting, because you'll have to have an ordinance to appoint this committee. And then we can start advertising for it, and they can start meeting and report back to you in a month. Start reporting back to you in a month.
Oh, do we need to be that formal? Can we just have a blue room, sit down, and everybody just chew the fat? And, why does everything always got to be a committee and ordinances? Why can't we all just sit around
We have an ad hoc group.
talk and yak about things, and probably half the people are going to get mad and leave anyway?
That's the workshop.
Yeah. So
It's just a public record meeting.
you just advertise it, and people in the community that would like to be involved in it, that are going to be fruitful, and,
So just real quick, I'm just going to put on my planner hat for a little bit. Sometimes most of the time, it's more productive if you have a group come up with a skeleton that the public can discuss. Otherwise, it's kind of a free-for-all and anger and what are you doing, and you really don't accomplish much. But however the board wants to proceed with it.
I really think we'd be better off having a committee, simply because when you ask someone to do something, it works a whole lot better than putting an ad in the newspaper and say, hey, come on, come on.
okay?
At least that's been my experience.
All right, I guess we'll do a committee,
Task force.
task force, whatever you'd like to call it.
Okay.
All right, is there anything further? That being said, this workshop is adjourned.